guest this week is Kate Adams, who's a director at the Forward Institute, an organisation specialising in responsible leadership. Kate has over 20 years' experience working in both the private sector as a human capital consultant and in-house at executive and non-executive level for social purpose organisations such as Comic Relief, Nesta, Tech Nation, Missing People, and the British Paralympic Association. She's a firm advocate for the role that leaders can and must play to deliver the change and impact that society needs. Over 90% of organisations are committed to tackling societal issues, but less than 40% are acting. Kate helps senior leaders to take accountability, navigate, and close that gap. Welcome to the business of being brilliant, Kate.
Wow, thanks, Helen. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
I'm so pleased to get you on the show. We've known each other for a number of years. I'm not going to say how many because we kind of worked together in our consulting days quite early in our careers. And it's been lovely to see your fantastic career since then and chat to you more recently about some of the roles you've had along the way and what you're particularly passionate about and focused on doing at the moment. So looking forward to digging into all of that over the next 20 minutes, half an hour with you.
It is a bit intimidating being on a podcast called In the Business of Being Brilliant when
I haven't thought about that from a guest perspective. Instant pressure to be brilliant. No, well, you know all about creating businesses that allow people to work at their best and to contribute at their best and to be a brilliant organization. So we'll approach it in that light. And so we're going to talk particularly about the notion of responsible leadership. We'll unpack that a bit about what it means and your current role, how you help promote that. But we're also going to be chatting a bit about your career generally, and also digging into the nature of some of the pressures that leaders face today, and how they can cope with that as well, a bit from your own experience at very senior levels. So but before we get into that, I wanted to ask, when you're not working and you're not in work mode, what's a favorite way to spend some downtime? What do you most like to do?
Typically be in nature. It's kind of the antithesis, isn't it? So I love doing yoga. I have an app on my phone that takes terrible to take tech, but I will typically go and be outside. By the coast is my happy place. If I can't get to the coast, just be outside, go for a walk, do some yoga, disconnect. Actually, is I think that where I recharge.
Yeah.
So that, and then I think that's how, if I'm thinking about my own self-care and recharging,
Yeah.
and then if not, then being with the family, playing, being
Yeah.
silly, playing, doing fun things and having a laugh.
Yes, because there's nothing like that to really help you unwind, is there? Whether
Exactly.
it's playing a round of cards or, just chatting or playing a game of cricket in the garden or something. It's
Yeah,
amazing how it just focuses you on the present moment. Helps you let go of everything else.
yeah. And I think that's the trick, is it's the present moment. And I think that's probably why I reach for yoga sometimes, is because when you're trying to just when you're not working and you're doing other things, it's how do you live in the present, because life goes too fast. Work
Yes.
makes life go even faster. And I think that constant balance of how do I be in the present and make the most of what this day brings me is hard when you're driving on whatever career trajectory you're kind of driving on. And I think especially when it's a sort of purpose sense in your work, you feel real meaning, then you it's funny how people all want meaning in their roles, but the downsides of that is you drive yourself really hard.
Yes, that's really interesting to hear. And I think you're absolutely right. We live, quite wrapped up in what's coming up tomorrow, the rest of the week. Quite a lot of the time we're thinking about, what's in our schedule, our to-do list, what we're working towards, either individually or in an organization. And it can be so hard to just enjoy today and focus on today and let go of all those things that we want to accomplish or we have to remember and not forget. Yeah,
A real dose of reality, which is humility, and I'm just a just a person winging it, trying to have have a good fun life and do the best by what they do. There's nothing like, I'm blessed to have children. There's nothing like having children to realize that you're pretty bad at lots of things.
No, I know. Well, you're winging it very impressively.
That's the main thing, isn't it?
But I have the same. When I like pets do the same. We have a pet chicken. I mean, it's very grounding to leave my desk, go out and sort out her feeder and pick up chicken poo and stuff, because it's like, okay, this is the other side of me that not many people see.
Precisely, and that's probably the real part of me. Really, is just I I believe in extraordinary, and that drives me a lot. And I now have a nice piece of artwork that says that hanging on my wall. And I've grown up with extraordinary from having a brother with cerebral palsy and just seeing his extraordinary life every day, through to then I've tried to position myself in my career in extraordinary environments. And I love learning from that kind of navigating and strength and determination and focus of improvement and or advancement or progress or whatever words people want to use. So I sort of think, at home I'm when I'm at work, I'm just doing the best I can by the outcomes I'm trying to get. And at work, I guess we're always encouraged to be pushing forward into the next results or the outcomes and the goals we want. And at home, I have less about goals, I suppose. It's more about each day and
Yeah,
being present and enjoying the day, because we don't know how many days we have, right? So how
that's
do
so
you
true.
make sure that you go to bed at night and think today was a good day, or this week was a good week, or what can I do to make sure that right now things feel right? And that's hard, I think, as a mum, trying to think about my kids and how I raise them, trying to think about how to be a decent leader, all those things. So that's a lot to juggle. So yeah, when I'm not working, I just try and have some fun and quiet time and recharge and yeah, smile lots. Yeah.
That's lovely. And I think that will resonate for everybody listening and actually be quite comforting and a great reminder to us not to, yeah, put too much on ourselves all the time, and expect so much of ourselves, and to just be occasionally. But to come back to your words there about your career and kind of striving for excellence, whatever shape that takes, is that something that you were always conscious of from early in your career? I mean, has it, what's guided the moves that you've made throughout your career? Has there been a plan?
Yeah. Great question. And people ask me that quite a lot. No, I can I can create it as if there was a plan, but it's not true.
It's the hindsight plan, which is always perfect.
Yeah, I bought the jigsaw after I found the picture, and it's still going. But I think what I do know that shaped it is a few things. One is I've always been interested in people in organisations. So when you kind of come out of school and I was lucky to have a really strong education. There's kind of this expectation that I'd go into business, and I thought I don't want to do the numbers side. I want to do the people side. So hence I ended up at Towers Perrin doing sort of human resource consulting work. And there I learned about people and how they drive performance in organizations. And then I was also then sort of really interested in, when people are driving organizations, what's the role of people in society beyond just sort of private sector organizations? And that's when I got the chance to be in organizations like Comic Relief and Nesta and Missing People. And it's people driving society, right? So I've always been really interested in the role of people in organizations and performance, people in social change, people that just look at the role that they're playing and try to drive for progress. And that's always really inspired me. So I guess I'm lucky enough that I managed to work in places with people that inspire me and have helped teach me how to do those kind of things too. And then so get to a level where it's like, now I can actually, I've got the skill set to drive, pull this together and drive it myself. So people have always been a big theme, I guess, which has guided me. I think the other thing around, I feel really lucky that I've been able to play in that space between a commercial world and a social change world. So whether that's working with the private sector on its broader role in society, or whether it's working not for profits, thinking about how they become financially sustainable and how they then can plan longer term to have more meaningful change. And a lot of people don't realize how similar that is. People think that charities know how to make social change happen, or that charities know how to, they have an innate purpose and meaning in them. And it's really interesting that actually charities struggle with the strategic impact like organizations do. So I guess, in terms of coming back to the was there a plan and how my career shaped, it's always been about people. I think it's always been about progress. And then I've been lucky enough that I've moved that from being around in the corporate world to being around, Comic Relief's vision was very much a just world free from poverty. So understanding about UK development, international development, um, and looking at how people make change happen from government to corporates to not-for-profit sectors and how they come together to do that. And then through to there's this big tech digital fourth industrial revolution hurtling towards us. What's that doing for the role people are playing in shaping society? So that's when I went to Nesta and got amazing opportunities and insights into AI and what harm could that do versus what's the opportunity. And so yeah, I guess curiosity and progress are probably things that have kept making me move and go and learn new things.
Yeah, that's so interesting and fantastic that you've discovered that you can work in organizations and in roles that blend the commercial and the kind of the third sector, the more public service oriented organizations. Because a lot of people would think, it has to be either or. I mean,
Yeah.
either public sector or private sector or charity sector, but actually it's more of a Venn diagram and you're playing right at the heart of it. And was there a particular light bulb moment when you realized that actually you wanted to bring in more or gain more experience or bring in more relevant content from and context from that bigger social picture, the social impact picture? Was there, or was it just a natural progression from the roles you happened to take on? So I was thinking, is there a moment when you suddenly thought, I don't just want to focus on the commercial world and on profit and stakeholders and all that. I want to have a bigger lens.
Yeah, I think the the move actually from Towers Perrin to Comic Relief was a bit more opportunistic than that. I actually had a sabbatical from Towers Perrin and the opportunity to work in Comic Relief. And within the first sort of 2-3 months, the chief exec had said, "Will you come run my world?" And I was like, "Oh, actually, I hadn't really thought about that." But after thinking sort of long and hard on what it meant with sort of halving my salary and totally different, I just got a mortgage. It's like, oh, I thought actually no, this feels more like life to me, or it had more meaning and a lot of fun and a lot of relevance. Relevance has always been important, I think, for me. It's like a drinks party when people say, "What do you do?" And you say, "I work in management consultancy," and they're like, "Oh, okay," and they're kind of like,
There's
conversation
no
with you.
follow-up question.
If there isn't,
It's a bit of a conversation killer.
and then I used to go to sort of, a sort of party or the pub or something and meet people, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" I was like, "I work at Comic Relief." Have you met Lenny Henry? And straight away it's like, oh, even just really interesting how other people
Yeah.
have. I didn't do it for other people, but it was quite interesting to observe the difference.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that wasn't an aha moment per se, except, I guess with that the times at Towers Perrin then, it was just pre-IPO. Things were really commercially focused. And I think it felt more commercial than ever being in the organization at that time. And I felt like there was a much bigger squeeze on people. And I think that also made me probably think, how am I in this organization? Am I an asset? Am I a talent? What am I? And actually being deeply human and valued and valuable was important to me. And so I think the opportunity came at a time when it was probably been in Towers Perrin's history of probably one of its most commercial moments, thinking about what does it do next, which probably was a slight push factor from that. But I loved my time there, and I learned so much. And my career grounding, even now, a lot of my skills have come from the
Mm.
training I had at Towers Perrin. But so I think I'd got enough that I could build more of a career from that. So hence
Yes.
hence moving across. The Nesta move was definitely an aha moment about I just couldn't understand why. I kept seeing stories in the press about people might lose jobs, the robots are coming, and those kind of stories. And I said, people are designing those robots. Why would people be designing something that puts people out of a job when everybody needs to kind of earn money to put food on the table, and for their house, and just really basic human, basic Maslow human needs. Why would we be shifting society in a way that is detrimental to communities? And I think that was when I started reading more, and I didn't realize there was a whole school of thought out there about that. And that's when I found Nesta and was lucky enough to get a job there, where it's actually, yes, there's a lot of people thinking about this. How do we shape, and WEF do a lot of work on this as well, the World Economic Forum,
Mm.
around how do we shape society. I had a side hustle with a friend actually. She's fantastic, and it was called Society 5.0, which is how do we start to think about what the shape of society will look like after the fourth industrial revolution. Because if we're not thinking about that and we walk blindly into it, it's people, we get to choose, right? As much as people sort of say it out of control, humans get to choose how we shape society, really. I know there's a lot of other factors, and in fact, I guess we are at the moment being influenced by climate change, but that's the Anthropocene era, which is we have accelerated that. Even the climate we don't control, but we do influence heavily. So when it comes to tech, Nesta was an aha moment of, I just thought, I really want to be a part of understanding what are people doing to society that could have opportunity and harm, and how would we make sure it falls on the right side of that balance.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, to your point about shaping society now with the latest technology, I think the awareness that we have choices in that is hotting up with ChatGPT, and then the whole conversation about should we pause progress on artificial intelligence to figure out the moral and ethical do's and don'ts around it is quite interesting. And I think the questions a little earlier that you asked yourself when you were mulling over whether to stay or leave at Towers Perrin, what am I in this organization? Am I a number? Am I an asset? How am I valued? Those are great questions for people listening to think about if they're having a moment of reflection or pondering whether to move or go. So let's skip forward to today and your work and your role at the Forward Institute. Can you explain kind of what you do there and what the organisation's about, and just unpack the term responsible leadership a little bit?
Yeah, good question. So the Ford Institute, we've been going for 8 years. The founder, Adam Gudetzi, is our chief exec, and we essentially, I guess we're sort of pivoting a little bit at the moment. So we were founded very much with this sense of we know that people at the top of organisations and the way they lead impacts on society, and I think lots of people know that. How they respond to it is different, right? So that time was just the financial crash. There was lots of talk about who knew that these deals or these actions were going to potentially lead to these high risk situations, and we've now got everyday people really, really struggling as a result of I mean, at the time I think it was quite a bit of banker bashing, and whoever's to blame is I'm not sort of so interested in, but it was really clear that the influence of leaders in powerful organizations and influential organizations really needs to be thought about carefully. So Adam set us up 8 years ago. It was Sir Anthony Saltz that was leading the Saltz Review. That's why it's called the Saltz Review. And he's our chairman. And so they started with various organisations like the Army, like BCG, like Tesco, various organisations that Save the Children, and there's others that all came together to start setting up a way of, I guess, an executive programme that leaders could start to think about how do they take this more responsible lens in the way they lead. And that was 8 years ago. So we've grown. We've now got 600-700 people across the city and Whitehall who have been through our programme and continue to come through. And that was very much how we started. The premise then being it's not just for individuals, it's how they then lead their organisations. So it's how the idea being that responsible leaders mean responsible organisations, which then means a better society. That's the kind of simplistic way of looking at it. We very much believe the private sector can learn from the public sector and the third sector. So we were really keen to put all of those together because they have it's funny, some people don't realise they're going to have a challenge that they could support each other on, and we get such incredible feedback from people saying it was those different perspectives that really changed the way we thought about a problem and how we showed up in the way that we lead. So the Forward Institute is very much sprung up from that space, and now I mean, it's amazing, and one of the reasons I'm so happy to be here is that movement around the role of leadership in society and the role of organisations in society is a much bigger conscience about that. I think it's challenging because we see in the press a lot, right, that those that sort of say we've got purpose and meaning, we're trying to do goods in society, and put their heads above the parapet are also subject to some pretty heavy scrutiny. And I think we have to be really careful. One of the things we believe at the Ford Institute is that there is we have to be comfortable with a dose of it's to be understood in the right way, but almost a dose of hypocrisy. That people aren't all good and all bad. Leaders are human beings who are navigating really difficult things. So we are a critical friend to them and non-judgmental in that. We'll hold up mirrors. We will not always say popular things to them, but that sense of how do you navigate to, I guess, what would be the right outcomes in the situation, but who's judging that is really, really difficult. So it's a very interesting, like, I mean, I love it. It's a really interesting space in the sense of, I think a lot of people assume leaders have the answers, that leaders are good people or bad people, that there is a toolkit that tells you how to fix the culture of an organization that's toxic, or I don't know, all these things without kind of flagging too many results, but it's it's been in the press, the NatWest situation. You've got people like Barclays, it's in the press for their partnership with Wimbledon. And actually, Barclays does some amazing work for society. It, it's also the financial institution it is, but it's really challenging time to be in this space. And we love rising to the challenge of just supporting leaders to navigate it. One of the things that scares me is the more that people who put their heads above the parapet get shot down in that cancel culture, the less leaders are going to want to try and do the right thing. And I should also say, actually, just it's not new. Leaders have been looking at ethics and philosophy of organizations, what they mean and how to lead for a really long time. It's just maybe more zeitgeist or more in the press at the moment. So we support leaders of organizations to I guess lead responsibly. And your question about what is responsible is a really good one. And this we have a point of view on that, but we're also not overly prescriptive, for the reason being, you can't say to someone, this is the answer for being responsible. And actually, the answer is it's deeply human. It's about deep listening. It's about character. It's about empathy. It's about including different voices and multiple perspectives. It's much more about those things. It's not I've got these policies. I've got someone in this role looking at this. It's not action as in activity. I mean, yes, that's a part of it, but actually being a responsible leader is much more about the way you consciously lead, to be inclusive, to listen to others, to think about the impact that you're having. So we do a lot on that side of development of people, and then connecting that into skills. So there's something about working on yourself. There's then something about the skill set people need. So a lot of the organizations we partner with, we're not for profit, so we do call it partnering. They're not clients. We partner and we want to work with them and build long-term relationships with them on what's a long-term journey. And a lot of them are sort of saying it's hard for our leaders now to think about, because we're in such a connected world, we can only really deliver our results if we work with other people, other partners and other organizations, and we need to understand the system we're working in. And actually, if we don't, we've seen through COVID, if you don't understand the system your organization's operating in, you don't see the risks that are coming around the corner. Everything's connected. The supply chains are connected. The impact of what you do is connected. So how organizations think about the system they're operating in is a totally new skill set to a lot of leaders. It might not be in maybe a political environment, but to the majority of organization leaders, that's quite a different skill set. So there's the kind of way of being as a leader. There's specific skill sets in order to lead into the futures that we need. There's the sustainability agenda, the digital agenda, geopolitics is coming in now. There's this sort of systems thinking in the sense of you're never in isolation anymore as an organization. Um, there's a lot around future generations and thinking about in the workplace now, especially for 3.5 years, haven't we, where essentially now, where we've not all been in this office environment that we were used to,
Yeah.
and how that's playing out for people that have only had careers of 5 years, or how do they know even what a workplace is? We have a totally new type of workplace now, so we have that quite a lot, and how you encourage psychological safety in organizations. And so there's a lot from the kind of big picture and being through to skill sets, through to specific contexts to partner organizations.
That's really fascinating to hear and describe it so articulately, and uh, you know, really convey some of the very significant pressures and challenges that people leading organizations face. I mean, what really struck me was your point, well, a couple of things. Your point about, being brave and sticking your head above the parapet can come with really painful consequences. Um, and you can kind of get shot down for not doing the right thing and shot down for doing the right thing, and you can't make
Yeah,
anybody happy any of the time. But also your other point about the answer to that, about what is responsible leadership, is deeply human. I think it's kind of reassuring in a way, because it's saying you don't have to be this superhuman genius who knows everything, who can do everything, who is, all omniscient. Or how actually it's almost the opposite. It's about being more humble, listening, just all those very, as you say, very human qualities.
yeah,
um yeah.
yeah,
And I know a concept that you've mentioned to me in the past, and I'm kind of narrowing back the conversation here, something about the concept of the personal boardroom. And I'm wondering if you can explain what that is and how that can help someone who might be in a position of leadership and dealing with a number of these pressures, and, wondering how they manage that in a sustainable way for themselves as well.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, actually. Quite a bit of the work we do with organisations is helping those leaders to create this kind of environment for themselves, and we do it on the program. So it's I mean, it's a relatively well-known concept, but for anybody who, it doesn't need to be a formal thing. It's essentially, as you have challenges that you face, who do you draw on? Do you have have you kind of consciously thought through the network of who do you draw on for those challenges? So I think a lot of people probably don't realize they have one, but they might have one, or they might have a beginnings of one. Um, and some people call it an inner circle, some people call it a personal boardroom. But that idea that who do you go to for this specific leadership challenge that you have? So some people you might go to for um, I don't know, a career challenge that you've got, or you might be struggling with, you've got quite a lot of time with the board at the moment. You're not sure how to best present to the board. You're not sure what they really want. So how do you prepare for like big board presentations? And you might have a couple of people in your personal boardroom that you're saying, I'm thinking this approach. Does that seem right? Or you might have just some really sensitive, and I think these are growing as well in terms of sort of, what might get called an HR issue or something at work. You're like, this is really hard to deal with, really hard to deal with. I think things like mental health in the workplace, if you're managing people with mental health challenges, it's really hard because you're trying to grapple with this. I need the job done, but they're really struggling. How do I support them and deliver for the organization? And those feel really uncomfortable in terms of being deeply human. And so you might have someone in your personal boardroom that you say, how do I navigate that? What have you dealt with? What and people would just shed a new light on something, that they might just ask you questions. It's a bit like different coaches or different
Mm.
mentors or different advisors that you have. So it's just surrounding yourself with people, and equally people that will criticize in the nicest with much love way. So people say you're getting a bit ahead of your station. You probably need to partner. Okay, thanks. People that will literally say to you, actually, you're sounding like you've got all the answers there and you haven't. So just be a bit careful. Or that kind of stuff is equally really helpful.
Yes, someone who's going to be really honest, or say what might not be easy to hear, but is
Exactly.
the medicine you really need at that point in time. Yeah.
Or just
Thank.
let go of that, Kate. You're not going to achieve that. Just let go of it. What can you do?
Yes.
because you
I
can't
know.
do that. But, okay, thank you. I needed to hear that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. You're making me laugh because I know you know my husband that's got that skill set as well. And the number of times I've sat down at lunch and said something's really I'm really wrestling with something, and he'll just ask one question, something like, "Why does that matter so much?" And I'm like, "Oh, darn it." Okay, let me rethink about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know the value of having those people, but you're saying, be thoughtful about who you might call on for what and who, and it's not that they all get round the table at the same time, but it's different people to call on for different
It
reasons.
is, and it's really important you think about where are your weaknesses and blind spots and have the courage to kind of fill those too.
Yes.
So that some of our former Towers Pairing colleagues are kind of the people that are my reality check.
Yes. Yeah.
They're brutal. I mean, we go for dinner every 6 months, and they can be brutal in some of the stuff that comes out. But you're like you. I just know that it's always the best intentions in the way
Yeah.
that it's said, and they're probably mostly right. And
Yeah.
it's really grounding to have those different voices that just like Kate, why do you even care so much about that? It's not important. You're like, actually, no, you're right. It's probably not. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can get so wrapped up in the here and now or our current role. And it's another good reminder why building our own networks can be so helpful as you go on in your career, because some of those early relationships sometimes feel very safe ones to when you've kind of gone your separate ways, and to just go and be really honest and get an honest answer back as well. So if we were talking kind of another 10 years time, what would you like to be telling me that you're doing or you've done? What's an unfulfilled ambition that
Yeah.
you've got?
Gosh, it's a hard question. I think there's one thing that actually I'm very excited that it's happened in the last week. Actually, that I'm very excited about is I'm getting the chance to go to the Paris Paralympic Games next
Wow.
year
Wow.
as a board member there. So we get to go to Paris and be a part of the kind of Paralympics GB team, working through British House and getting to watch some of the sport and supporting the athletes
How
and
exciting.
the organisation. So that actually that's something that I think I'd always dreamed of being able to do something like that. So that's a massive. I will have done that. I could tell you that in 10 years' time, and just to be a part of that is phenomenal. But in other things, it's interesting because the biggest thing I've learned is I no longer have a career plan. I had a career plan actually, and it was sort of tracking to a CEO trajectory. And the closer I got to that, the more I realised I'm not sure if that was actually why was I doing that and who was I doing that for? It was all a bit like, is that just because I think I can or anyway? So it shifted, I suppose, and kids and COVID and various different things that happen in life made me realize it's what's the life plan? Where does work fit into that? And maybe it's just I grew up a bit, to be honest. But so my life plan is in 10 years' time, my kids will be finishing school, and I guess our commitments in the house and where we live will change. And it's thinking actually I'd love in 10 years' time to start prioritizing home and life more, but still being able to have a career, but maybe in a different way. So my goal is to have these my sort of vision was this role of chief conscience officer, which I think it's essentially, I mean, I don't even know that it's a person. It's a decision making framework by which you look at organizations, and you think, are they looking at the right perspectives when making a decision? How will it affect current and future generations in their well-being, in the decisions that you're taking? And in fact, there's great precedents in Wales. They do have the Wellbeing of Future
Mm,
Generations Act,
yeah.
and I'm looking at that at the moment in terms of a framework. Is that an applicable framework into organisations and governance? But I would love in the future to have a sort of a role that is working with organisations on, it's probably a non-exec role or an advisory role on that kind of decision making. So I would love to I really want to keep working with leaders on the kind of decisions they're making and how they're consciously aware of they are impacting society, whether it's their employees, their customers, wider society in what they do. Are they aware of that, and are they taking that seriously when making decisions? So the plan probably is to ideally, if I can, is shift into more advisory and non-executive director role, so I can have the flexibility to go to the beach more.
Yes. Well, what a great goal. Fantastic. Well, I wish you the very best of success with that plan or general
Mm.
goal, and however you get there, but I'm sure you will get there. And it's been such a pleasure talking to you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being so generous about and open about your career reflections and experiences, and what helps you as a leader to, balance the demands on your time and energy with enjoying just life today in the here and now, and also how you work with other leaders to help them both do that and to think more responsibly about their impact as well. It's been so much fun reconnecting and talking with you. Thanks for all the brilliant bits of advice you've been sharing in the conversation too.
You're welcome. I hope someone finds them helpful. Thanks, Helen.
I know they will. Thanks, Kate.